Hi, my name is Keith Cooper from Northlight Images. This is a Canon PRO-310 and this video is a short video about things you can do to keep it in good condition, keeping it clean, problems of ink spray, various other things, storage, power supplies, things like that. Just generally making sure that it lasts. Now, I have suggested in the past that one good way of keeping dust out of your printers is to use one of these, a leaf blower, and I do occasionally use this on old printers when they've been sitting for a while because it's a great way of getting rid of dust, but it can blow dust into the wrong places. So yes, by all means keep the insides dust free, but perhaps not something as strong as this. Now this 310, this is one that I've got here for testing, which means that it's still on its first set of cartridges. But I've done quite a few borderless prints in testing various things, and already there is some ink buildup along the foam pad down the bottom here. Now I'm going to have a look at aspects of that, whether it's a good idea doing much borderless, depends very much on the printer and why you do it, how long you can leave it, and things like power supplies and stuff like that. But first up, leaving it unused. I've got this one set at its default. It powers off after 240 minutes. There's a setting in the menu here. If you leave it plugged in, it will go into a sort of standby mode, which it is using a little bit of power, but it's not switched on. If I was using it a lot, one of these, I'd leave it at that. When would I unplug it? If I was going away for a few weeks, few months perhaps, I might leave it. Now I know from my experience of looking at this, which is the Pro-300, that actually the 310 is very resistant, since it's the same print head, effectively the same as, I should say, this one is very resistant to being left. Yes, it will use up ink in some cleanings when you start it up, but it's pretty good as printers go, and I'd have no trouble about leaving this for a few weeks unused. Ideally, printers like to be used regularly. Now, if you take something like this big P5000 that's sitting next to it here, that I have a diary reminder that pops up every week and says, have you printed effectively? If I haven't printed, I switch it on, it runs, it does a paperless nozzle check, and it does it. That is a production printer. That printer is designed to be run every day. Leave this one for months on end and you are asking for trouble. Whilst I wouldn't recommend leaving one of these for months on end, it's actually nowhere near as bad as one of that. But they're different printers aimed at very different markets. This printer is consumer level printer. Yes, it's one of Canon's pro level printers, but it's still basically a consumer device. There are various aspects of it which sort of, in a way, give that away. Now, somebody did ask me about it drying out and humidity. If you live in a very dry climate and you're going to leave it for a while, I know of people who've actually just put the printer in a plastic bag, sealed it up and left it like that to stop it from drying out excessively. Yeah, I'm in the middle of the UK, so the chances of climate change producing something like that is not going to happen anytime soon. I won't say never, but it's certainly not going to happen anytime soon. So that's not a consideration. But if I lived in the southwestern US or somewhere like that, certainly at altitude as well, then you have to be a bit more careful in keeping your printers fit. They will dry out more easily than certainly conditions here. Now I got this is the Ilfalux lamp I use for general print testing and viewing, and have a good look inside, open up the printer, have a look. Now there is a foam strip runs along the bottom. That foam strip has several uses. One, if you print borderless, it catches the overspray, but it doesn't collect all of the overspray. There's always going to be very fine ink droplets which get into the air inside it and spread around. Now, with big printers like this, and say the Pro-1100, which has a vacuum system as well, the ventilation internally, so the airflow, has been carefully designed to stop ink buildup. In this, there's nothing special for it, as with most smaller printers. So borderless overspray has produced a distinct mark running on here, and you can see the sizes for borderless because there are also lines on it as well where it's oversprayed on the edge. Now, I've printed perhaps a dozen borderless prints on this, and I say this is still on its first ink cartridges, so I wouldn't expect much spray, but already I'm seeing the white plastic rollers at the back here, or guides at the back, showing signs of ink spray on them. Now, you might want to clean those, but be very careful if you're cleaning in here, because there is a metal ridge at the back which has a grease on it. Now, it's not just any old, it's a special grease that's, you know, for this printer, and printers do use all sorts of special lubricants on it. That should not be wiped off. So if you're wanting to just get to clean in here, be careful not to wipe that grease off. You also want to be sure not to get it on, there's a very thin plastic band at the back. Now that is an integral part of how the printer positions the print head. You don't want any marks on that. And also, if you look at the far end where there's a roller, the paper advance roller, there's grease on that as well. You do not want in your cleaning process to get rid of any of those greases, so be very careful in doing stuff like this. But that foam pad, that's not replaceable. If you do a lot of borderless printing, and I'm talking thousands of prints, you will eventually, that will fill up. And it will need replacing, and that's a Canon option. There's not a user replaceable item for that. This big printer here, I said it was done for production printing. It has a separate maintenance tank for collecting overspray from borderless. Even so, I don't use borderless on this one, but, you know, very rarely. But it has its own ink tank. This is nearly 10 years old, and that is still the original maintenance cartridge that came with the printer. I do borderless that little, but it's taken care of in something like this. In this, it goes onto that pad. Now, I mentioned borderless overspray, but when the printer in normal use is printing, when it goes past the print head, goes past the edge of the paper at this size, it fires a few nozzles, particularly if they've not been used much. Now, Canon don't say exactly what this is, but it does mean that for every sweep of the printer head across here, there may be one or two droplets of ink. Now, they add up over the course of making prints, and I've only been using this for a while, so I'm still on the first cartridges, but I use just ordinary kitchen roll to just gently folding it to make sure I don't touch those greased parts, to just dab on the foam there and absorb some of the ink, because that ink can collect there. And yeah, I just don't like having pools of ink sitting about. It's not a pool because it is, you know, it's foam, but this is after I've done quite a bit of cleaning. I just hold it on there and I pick up a little bit there. Now, that's after that. As you can see, rather a lot of droplets of ink. Now, how much ink is that? I don't know really, but that's ink that's been used in the overspray and for the cleaning. This printer also has, when it's doing maintenance, it will use up a bit of ink on that. Some printers, that goes into maintenance tanks, obviously one for, you know, the printer like this. But on this one, the maintenance tank is effectively a very large pad inside the printer, which gradually fills up over time. Once again, not user replaceable. But is that a problem? Yes, if you're intending to do thousands and thousands of prints on a printer like this, then it's quite likely after a few years those pads are going to fill. And I do mean using it at quite a high volume. But I would have to query why you are using a printer with relatively small 14 milliliter ink cartridges for doing thousands and thousands of prints. Somebody said to me many years ago, if you want a fast car, buy a fast car. If you want a big printer, buy a big printer. If you want a production printer, buy a production printer. I get a lot of people ask saying, I want to use this for such and such a business. And you have to say, what level, what volume of business are you looking at? Because this is not a high volume printer. This is a high quality printer, and it is very good. I've got lots of print examples that I found for it. But anyway, keep that foam pad clean, and really don't do too much borderless printing. Now, what happens if you particularly want to do lots of borderless printing? Well, that's another matter. I really ought to look again at this, at sort of what options there are if you want to do higher volumes of borderless. But you can't, for example, stack up a whole stack of blank cards with this printer and feed them through for printing cards. Now, one-offs and the likes, it does very nice. It prints cards very nicely, and for some sizes it will print borderless as well. So that's great. But essentially, you want to keep this clean. Now, it's looking used already, and as I say, I'm still on the first set of cartridges here. How often do you want to do this cleaning with this pad here? I think I'd probably, it depends on how many prints you're doing, but I think I'd probably want to do it for my usage, every 6 months maybe, just to stop it building up just a bit too much. But, you know, if you do a lot of printing on it, you might want to do it a bit more, because the other thing is that ink down there, you think, well, you know, does it really matter? It's in the foam pad. That ink down there will mix with paper dust. Now, you get paper dust, particularly if you use art papers and the like. You'll get fibres, and that will mix with the ink that's here. They will stick to that, and you'll end up with a gunk on it. And yeah, that's the sort of stuff that also can build up sometimes under the print heads. But physically cleaning the print head on this printer is quite a tricky thing to do. You have to sort of start it up, pull the plug, and it's really not something that's, you know, that you really want to do unless you absolutely need to. Some printers it's much easier to clean under the print heads, but yeah, that's more advanced cleaning. So there you have it. Just keep it clean in there. Powering, leave it powered on, doesn't really make much difference to it. And well, one other, as it were, bonus bit: do a nozzle check occasionally if you haven't used the printer. If the nozzle check fails, the normal process is then to do a cleaning and then to do another nozzle check. If the nozzle check fails, leave it a minute or two before you do the printing, do the cleaning. Then after the cleaning, you might want to do another nozzle check. Leave it a few minutes. Most of the problems, the blockages in these, are tiny air bubbles, and they settle out. The heads are designed so that air doesn't collect in them, so they clean up. So if you have to do a cleaning, if you're thinking doing a second cleaning, okay. If nothing changes from the first to the second cleaning, resist the temptation to do power cleans and all the stuff like that. You are doing nothing but wasting ink. With the little cartridges inside this, wasting ink means you're going to need to replace cartridges. So, you know, just leave it. Patience is what's needed. Many a printer, I've had a bad nozzle check. I've not needed to do any printing. So I've done a clean, and then I've not done the next nozzle check until the following day, and everything has been fine. They just leave them to settle. But the other key thing, and I'll say this just to be sure, do not touch the band, the thin plastic band that runs across here, and make sure you don't remove any of the grease, because the grease is essential for the print head going backwards forwards. Anyway, if you've got any questions, feel free to ask. It's an excellent printer. I'm not surprised, because this one is as well, and there's not that much difference between them, just mainly the inks and a few other little bits and pieces. Anyway, hope that was of help. Thanks for watching, and bye.